All right, everyone. We're waiting on Shawn to show up. He is running a bit late. Of course, he is coming from Logan, so that might be the reason. But so he's almost here. So what we thought we would do is we would chat about some news until he got here.
And there are some great news stories.
There is. One I thought about talking about is kind of the ministry of truth, or maybe a better way to put this is the Biden administration is well, they're talking about starting up within the Department of Homeland Security a board that says whether your information you're putting out is honest or not.
And you know that kind of a board will be chock filled of freedom-orientated, libertarian-minded conservatives and other patriotic type folk.
Well, it's not just that, because even if let's just say, even if it was, say, a Democrat, kind of a Democrat machine, that would still be kind of okay, you know.
For who?
Well, all right. The reason I say it would still kind of be okay is that it would, if it wasn't a administrative animal.
You mean like, okay, they want to say bad information is here and they don't have any teeth to actually tear down the information, but they can label it with a rating or something like that? Kind of like the Better Bureau business?
It could be. But let's just say I don't like that the administration, that the people in power are setting up more means to collect more power. That's what's concerning to me about it. But we'll go ahead and kind of.
Well, who's going to be in charge of this great operation? And by the way, the Ministry of Truth is, I don't know if that's really going to be the name of this organization,
No.
but it is a parody of George Orwell's 1984. And in that book, there was a Ministry of Truth, and it was a brutal regime weapon against the population for misinformation and propaganda.
Well, let's go back a little bit. All right. So Elon Musk bought Twitter, or is in the process of buying Twitter. From what I understand, that purchase is not going to be concluded for months. The last word I got, we can expect August to October timeframe of that purchase being concluded. But the administration came out and spoke highly against it. You know, even though Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but they don't like a millionaire having control of means of communication. So he might be here. Come on in.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yep.
All right.
Milne's here. He can join us for the chat.
We got to get Milne a camera now because we're the only ones showing up on the game board.
I'll pull him in. But anyway, so it's turned on. The administration came out and talked about how they're unhappy about
Elon Musk purchasing Twitter.
Yeah, about Elon Musk purchasing Twitter.
Because that's what the administration should be worried about is who's buying an internet web page, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's falling economy and people starving in the streets and Black lives aren't mattering.
Or enough. But so the DHS is starting, I think they're going to call it, sorry. All right. We'll just pull it up on the screen.
Nice hat, Shawn.
Thank you.
So, and everyone, I'm Jared. That's Dave. I don't know if we announced ourselves like we're supposed to.
Oh yeah, we did get a complaint. They're like, why don't you guys talk about yourselves a little bit more and tell us who you are before you start trying to force propaganda down our throats.
Yeah. And everyone who doesn't know, this is Shawn. Shawn is a previous county commissioner here in Tooele, and here in a minute we're going to chat with him about his experience with that and what he's got going on now. But anyways, back to this story here. We've got Department of Homeland Security announces the creation of the board on Wednesday to coordinate the federal government's activities related to countering disinformation with an immediate focus on unauthorized migration to the United States and the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So
they're talking about preventing Ukrainians from illegally crossing the Mexican border?
I think what they're talking about is clamping down on information that talks about the unauthorized migration, which is, why do we keep changing the language?
Well, birds of the feather will do their thing.
We're just changing the language. It was illegal immigration, or dreamers, but whatever. It's a communist tactic. And then the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which is a hot mess, and me and Dave are kind of sit on opposite sides of, and it continues to be a hot mess. I know Shawn's looking at me like I'm crazy. I don't think
I have no idea where either of you are, but
I think we have no business over there. All we're doing is...
See, Shawn, I'm on the right side, and he's on the wrong side.
Yeah.
I don't know what side you're on other than he said polar opposite. I might be somewhere in the middle, but I
would not say we're on polar opposites, Jared.
Okay.
Come on. You just want to distance yourself.
Probably not polar opposites, but I don't think we should be sending them anything at all. All we're doing is...
Are you trying to bait me to get into the conversation?
Yeah, jump on in.
I'm totally good with us sending something to kick Russia's butt. I think we ought to.
It won't work.
Okay, I disagree, but okay.
It won't work. Unless we touch ground over there, Ukraine can't stand up to Russia. Doesn't matter what we send them.
We could send them other people's people if we had the ability to acquire mercenaries.
But how well is that working for Russia? They're using mercenaries. How well is that working for them?
Yeah, but I bet the pay that they'd get through our mercenary system would be a lot better than the pay the Russian mercenaries are getting. We have like thrift savings plans.
I'm sure
health benefits.
I'm sure we've already got mercenaries on the ground. I can damn near guarantee it. I guarantee we already have special forces, MARSOG, and SEALs on the ground. But unless we touch boots to ground, unless we start plopping Abrams down with trained U.S. soldiers driving them, Ukraine doesn't stand a chance.
What about
they're not
privatized?
Big enough. They don't have any economic stability. They've got no morale for it. They don't have the backed training for it. Russia's shown that they've got a barely trained army.
I was going to say, how well is their training working out for them?
But for real contact, Russia has run them over.
Well,
so
I think there's two different silos of what you've said so far: the whether or not we ought to, and whether or not anything is working.
And I don't think we ought to either. We're just extending the suffering of the people of Ukraine.
I don't know that I agree with that, because I see a holistic picture that's bigger than Ukraine.
Well, the fact
that we're having this conversation about Ukraine after Crimea, after Georgia and Chechnya, I actually just don't think that it's just about Ukraine.
Well, I know it's not just about Ukraine. It's about NATO's actions.
Worry us.
It's about NATO's actions between 1990 and 2010.
Okay, now you're making a subtly different, and I think that the nuance is very important.
No, I'm making an argument that directly touches ground.
Are you conflating us, the United States of America, with NATO?
Directly.
See, and I think that while they're related, they're different.
Can you explain that one?
Well, we belong to NATO, but we aren't NATO.
Okay.
NATO is much bigger than we are. NATO has more to fear about the hostilities of Russia more immediately than we do.
And the minute we leave NATO, NATO doesn't exist anymore.
I was going to say the same thing.
I wouldn't disagree that it would look very different.
NATO is us. I promise you that Clinton came out and told NATO to do something, and NATO said, consider it done.
If mom and dad pass away and they had 5 children, are the children no more? Are they still family?
As a family unit, depends on how they act.
Okay. If the eldest child is 19,
but let's say mom and dad pass away, they have 5 children, 5 children get adopted by 5 different families. What are the chances of them still remaining a family?
So you just proved the point. It's the how, not whether or not mom and dad are still in the picture.
NATO doesn't stand a chance. NATO doesn't have the spending to meet it. We've supported NATO. We've carried NATO for
I would disagree with that statement because NATO is powerful, and it's much more powerful with us behind it, supporting it. But, I mean, the Western Europe has great technologies. It has nuclear power. It doesn't have a fascist glue to push them forward with the momentum that Russian government and military forces have. It's slower. It works off of like a republic type system.
I was going to say democracy usually is slower, and it's a little bit messier and not as quick and nimble, but at the same time, the power...
And a complete failure every time it's tried.
Well, what isn't a complete failure every time it's tried? No country has ever existed. Are you suggesting that
democracy shouldn't be something to aspire to?
Yes.
Well,
he likes monarchy.
No, I don't like monarchy, but should I read, I don't know, should we go to Tocqueville when I talk about democracy? You know who de Tocqueville is, right?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember what he said what did he say about democracy?
Go ahead, Jared.
He said, I love this country, but I fear it won't last once they discover that they can vote other people's things for themselves.
Well, that happens all the time, Republicans and Democrats. It's just that Republicans oftentimes say that Democrats do it more. I disagree with that, by the way, as a Republican myself, but
I'm not speaking about Republicans. I'm speaking about the source of democracy as a government.
I hear you. And while it's still messy and it definitely takes time to do coalition building, I still believe that coalitions are a good thing.
I mean, it destroyed Greece. Big part of why Rome fell. Yeah, it's always failed. I'm just going historically here.
So how much time do you give America?
Well, you know, there's actually, who was it who wrote about empires? And he says empires have 250 years. Who was it? Got to remember. I read his book. So if we do that, what, 30 more years?
So you're giving us 30.
Yeah, if I go by his accounting, but that's empires on a whole. It has nothing to do with democracy. That has to do with just actions of empires.
Yeah, but if you had to bet your life savings in fiat dollars, what would you say America has left on the timeline? It's a good question.
That is.
I'd give it 100 years myself.
Would you?
Yeah. Plus or minus 25.
Okay. I think it depends on, well, obviously who's elected next. Yeah.
And let me give you my reasoning. This next generation, you know, I don't see them being a huge manufacturing powerhouse. But well, the generation after that,
we're not a huge manufacturing powerhouse now.
Exactly.
I mean, we've lost that. And China's starting to lose that now, which is why they're building it in Africa. China, and this is the crazy thing. So, you know, that book the lady talked about last night, the
5,000 year lead.
How it seems.
I'm going to read that, by the way.
How everything
good book you should.
Is it?
How everything seems to have advanced faster. It seems like China's going through that 250 year. They're already at a year 150 and they're into it 30 years because they're already starting to outsource their manufacturing. That's not something we did over here for what, 180 years?
And I think that's a false equivalency.
China's already starting to.
This is in this era. We actually live in a special era where, like, if you look back in time when the Greeks went to the walls of Babylon and looked up in amazement and said, how did these ancient people have this amazing technology?
Yeah, when
it must have been so advanced. We will never say that about our ancestors.
Will we not?
What?
No.
Are you kidding me? Look, like, seriously, still, we don't know how certain big tonnage blocks got put into place around the globe.
Look, I'm not talking about the aliens. That's totally wrong, man. You can't equate us to the aliens.
Is before you started giving that response and before I spoke just before that, I thought, he kind of looks like that guy from the History Channel.
Dave does?
Yeah.
Which guy?
Without the hair, of course.
Oh, you're talking Giorgio Tsoukalos.
Yes.
The man. It's one of my favorite human beings.
And so the fact that 30 seconds, if that, later you made a proposition as though.
Well, it makes you wonder. You've got you've got Xenophon, who on his, what was it?
And he was the guy who said, I wonder how these wonderful Babylonians built this amazing technology.
He ran into, I think it was the walls of Akkad, and he couldn't believe that it was there. He wrote about, like, we've got nothing like this. And Akkad was, 800 years earlier. Is that right? I
don't remember the timeline, so you got me, bud.
Well, Xenophon ran into the walls of Akkad, right?
I thought it was the walls of Babylon myself, some sort of Babylonian
Akkad
city.
was a part of Babylon.
Okay.
Yeah. They were all there together for a minute.
I was going to say, and that division and creating multiple kings is part of their downfall. But anyway.
Was it creating multiple kings, or was their downfall kicked off when
their cultures didn't blend very well?
When a queen of the Scythians killed their emperor?
What happened to the ministry of truth?
Yeah,
we're off
that. Yes, we did.
But anyways, then you've got the story of Atlantis, which comes down to us through Egypt, and then we've got the Egyptians looked at the place they lived and didn't know how the Sphinx was built.
Well, now we build them in Las Vegas. It's not like we're going to marvel at this crap
and
anymore,
we put better lights on top.
And
but anyways,
we'll never marvel again at history in that way. Unless the aliens have built this amazing technology, blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you right now, those days are over. These great leaps of technology are so sudden, so hard, so solid in terms of force and momentum. We will never marvel like Xenophon did at the gates.
What if a solar flare hit us and fried out our electrical system?
We'd build it again.
How long?
I don't know.
How long would it take to reconstruct what we have here to remember cell phones? How long would it take?
Probably a lot quicker than you think.
Really?
I think so, yes.
I think the government estimates 12 years.
Which government?
Ours.
Okay, well, Zimbabwe might impress you.
They might. Of course, they've only got to build up to where they are.
Zimbabwe's got a lot more cell towers than per square mile probably than most countries than you think.
They might. I don't know. I mean, we do know Somalia when Somalia was anarchy, had the best cellular service in all of Africa. And then, then
the warlords took over.
Yeah. But anyway, so I don't know if you heard of this. The DHS is starting a
ministry of truth. It is
a
basically
board
that.
on truth, and we were just talking about that. What are your thoughts on something like that?
I think it's really dangerous when you start having government regulators determine what's the truth.
Good answer.
What if they were all Republican?
I don't even care which party it'd be.
All right.
Good.
I just think that it's one of those things that is the foundation of our democracy. And
we're not a democracy, though.
I know. We're a democratically elected republic. I know this, but you also know what I mean. So
we're a partially democratic elected republic that more democracy has been forced.
Things like this will only erode democracy, regardless of whether I take your bait on that finer point. I don't think it's a good thing.
Nope, it is not. But the lady they're putting in charge, Nina Jankowicz.
Oh, this is the cherry on top of the whipped cream, baby.
She is there's some funny videos about her, and I don't just want to blow out on her videos, but she had from what I understand, kind of like a YouTube channel that was
I heard she was on TikTok,
I think it's a little older, but it was a Harry Potter fan site, and not that knocks her, but she also did a lot of songs about this. Now this is not very old. It's only, I want to say, like a year old.
Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious.
See,
yeah.
It's how you hide a little lie.
I'm ready to just bow down and prostrate myself right before the Ministry of Truth.
In a way, I kind of dig that
if she's going to sing,
she's open and honest about that. And if I've got to have a ministry of truth, I want one that sings.
I mean, we did deal with Trump's tweets. Now we can deal with the musical course of fading of our democracy.
Hey, we know how I feel about Trump's tweets. That's the only part of Trump I liked. That's it.
Those were the good
imagine
days.
that you had a president that you got to hear his inner thoughts. You got to see his turmoil and the chaos instead of polished.
Could you imagine the inner thoughts of Biden? It'd be like so squirreled.
Makes you wonder.
And then he'd be like, where am I?
It does make you wonder. But yeah, the ministry, and regardless of our feelings, I don't think, I still don't think that Ukraine, regardless of how deeper into debt we throw ourselves, can stop the might of Russia, especially when I think, and it's kind of been proven so, that Russia's getting chattel support through previous BRICS nations, minus Brazil.
You look at it like maybe the whole goal isn't to stop Russia on this. First of all, we're gathering great intelligence on how they perform aerial maneuvers and attacks.
Oh, yeah.
We're learning about all their techniques on the battlefield,
Mm-hmm.
their capacity for supply lines,
Mm-hmm.
and we're kind of testing the waters on like what are their lines and limits to their nuclear ambitions. They haven't nuked us yet. So we've definitely figured out this is not where their line is.
I don't think Russia cares to go past that river. I still don't think they care to go past it. I think they didn't want Kiev. I think they tied up Kiev because it tied up the general staff while they took the South. The minute they had the South, they pulled out of Kiev.
Mm-hmm.
They owned Kiev. They had it. And they pulled out. I think they got exactly what they want. The Luhansk, Donetsk, so they could secure that highway to the Crimea.
I think the population is a lot more supportive of the Russian occupation over there. But
in Luhansk and Donetsk and Crimea, definitely. It's proven out in all their elections.
So, maybe this is more
Come
of
on, that's
Oh, well, sorry. I spoke for democracy for a minute. I apologize. Go on.
yeah.
Shawn.
We're assuming that they've got free elections.
I don't know.
they say the same thing about us.
But you know what? The elections that got the guy in front of Zelensky in was also argued to not be free by both sides. I don't know if there's free elections.
Do you remember when Belarus offered to come over and monitor our elections for us to make sure they were free and fair?
It's funny. It's like Coney says he's going to come over and run the Boy Scouts. But so I don't know. But that's what their elections say. We have to honor our own elections. So do we just honor ours? We're the only ones that have free elections and we do know that the Azov battalion has been in the East in a civil war for the last 14 years.
And for those that don't know, Azovs are the Nazis that Putin's referring to. Me personally, I'm starting to like Nazis more than communists. So I'm good with it myself. I don't know. One flavor just doesn't really taste that worse than the other, to be honest. But
there was news reporting all the last 14 years about what the Azovs have been doing. It hasn't been in, the New York Times and the mainstream, but the news reportings have been there. They've been in a civil war.
If you were Putin, wouldn't you have done the same thing?
Well,
I honestly think that he's militarily making probably a good decision. If he pulls back now, he secures that land. nobody's going to mess with him.
And I don't think he wants to absorb them into Russia. I think what he wants to do is make them neutral states.
Now he controls so much wheat on the planet that he's going to be almost as powerful as Bill Gates in terms of farmland.
Mm-hmm. Almost. I mean, no one's Bill Gates level. You don't get kicked out of India for that small stuff. Sean's probably wondering.
We got to stop talking about this stuff because the Ministry of Truth is going to come sing on our podcast.
Yeah, I'm just my final note on this. I think we're just extending the suffering of Ukraine. That's all I'm thinking, and adding a couple more commas to that little billboard in New York that shows our debt. That's all I'm thinking. I mean, and I don't want World War III. And militaries are quick to learn. I imagine if we touched boot to ground, that incompetent Russian army would probably pretty quickly learn how to defeat us.
God, if I was in the military right now, I'm so glad I'm not. But man, could you imagine having to serve under the competency of the current administration? But anyway, so here we are with Shawn Milne.
Yeah, we got Shawn in. Everyone,
let's let Shawn say something.
I don't know. This is not what I thought I was walking into. That's
you didn't.
For sure.
Well, we were.
You haven't listened to the show in the intermittents?
Listen, I haven't been on Facebook since the last week of January with any kind of earnest.
Wow. We're on YouTube as well.
Oh, well, duly noted.
But yeah, this is most of our conversations.
Do you use social media at all?
Yeah, Twitter every day, but Facebook not so much.
What do you think about the firestorm on Twitter lately?
About what, Elon?
Yeah.
I couldn't be less indifferent.
Oh, it's been so much fun.
Or more indifferent, actually.
Watching people lose their mind.
Now, how can you not have an opinion about that?
Why? Well, ask me a more specific question and maybe I do. But generally speaking, I don't think it's going to rock my world much. Believe it or not, like life goes on without Facebook, and I'm pretty sure to go on without Twitter too. It doesn't dictate my life, especially now that I'm not in elected office.
Mm-hmm. So what have you been doing with your time now that you're not in elected office?
Yeah, where are you?
I live up in Logan, and I work for the county of Cache, or Cache County. I do economic development and intergovernmental affairs for them, and it's pretty darn nice. I mean, I miss this community. I miss my friends. I miss the creature comforts of, well, any place that you've lived for decades. You're going to have your favorite places to go and people that you enjoy seeing. So, I mean, I miss plenty about this, but at the same time, it's wonderful up there. The winter, not so much. I do like heat.
It's crazy how an hour and a half drive makes that much of a difference in the winter.
Well, either direction. I mean, you go an hour and a half south.
Yeah, but it's crazy.
And the elevation and the presence of more water. So that humidity is there even during the wintertime. It certainly wicks away that body heat from your bare skin quicker.
Nestled into a bit of a canyon there. Cataract to the south. Well, you got Wellsville up at the north. Isn't it Wellsville?
South.
Wellsville to the south.
Wellsville's in the south.
Yeah, but you got kind of a canyon there. So yeah, that'd catch it.
So how is the economy of Cache County doing?
Oh my goodness. It's fantastic depending on how you look at it. It's also terrible if you're a business owner.
Really?
So as of December 31st, so a few months removed, Cache County had the lowest unemployment rate of any county in the United States, 1.0%. Now, seasonally adjusted, it's tied in. There were four of us a month ago that had the second lowest unemployment rate in the state. Juab had 0.1% lower. Seasonally adjusted, it went from 1.7 and 1.6 for Juab respectively. But it's fantastic because that's gangbusters, right? That means that we've got local businesses that are providing goods and services people want more of. The challenge is if you're a business, that low unemployment rate means that you also don't have enough people that are available in the workforce. And that's problematic because if you're a Utah company, regardless of where you are, but certainly I'm going to be wearing the hat for Cache County businesses, you want to take advantage of that demand of goods and services that you have to provide the world's markets or maybe a little bit closer to home. And you can't And so if you have your next closest competitor is a few states away, let's say hypothetically there's a state with 5% unemployment and they have reasonably inexpensive land and they have other great qualifiers, and you're thinking about expanding, you might choose that market a couple of states away because they have all these qualifiers and the available labor. If you're a Utah company and you have the capacity to provide more of your goods and services to willing, buyers, but you can't keep up with demand, but your competitor can, well, as that market grows, your market share will decrease because you're not able to keep up with capacity.
Yeah, you can't go past where you are, right?
Yep. Or you can, but you have to use automation, A, if that's doable for your particular type of business, and B, if you have the capacity for debt in which to take that on, right? Because the one thing about labor is it ebbs and flows. And as the demand ebbs and flows, you can let go of your labor, you can hire on new labor. So it's got a pretty good corollary between your demand and your cost side of providing that product or service to meet the demand. On the other hand, when you do automation, you can get a debt product to help, soften the blow, but it's capital intensive. And you have to take that on. And then when the demand ebbs, you're left with presumably a fixed mortgage payment, so to speak, and you don't have necessarily the same revenues to help pay for that. So it's a bit challenging for sure.
And how's the housing prices up there?
Oh, they're pretty good. No, they're like everywhere else, man. I know Tooele County doesn't know anything about housing crunches, but obviously with tongue in cheek, it's as problematic up there as it is anywhere else.
I heard Utah's right now poised to be one of the what do they call it? The heaviest house prices in the country, minus the big two, New York and California.
The Florida's got to be up there right now too.
Well, Boise, surprisingly, perhaps to you, but
that's just kind of one city that's absorbing that for Idaho. I mean, they are spreading out, but Boise, what is it? Boise Eagle, that area of townships there, where Utah is hitting it as a whole state.
So what's the attraction in Boise?
Boise's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like Boise. Every time I've been there, I like it up there.
I'm not going to talk trash about them, but we've got some pretty spectacular places here in our own state.
We do, but not if you're from California. You hate it here. It smells like a fart all the time. Work with us here. We don't want them all moving here.
Oh, well, no. My job is to get them to move here because we have jobs that we need them for. I hear you.
Can we hire other people?
So can you
12-year-olds?
Can you
from the other states,
72, like
Montana?
How are we going to fill the gap?
Montana, Arizona.
Shawn, I want to ask: can we import people from other countries to live in our territories, and like through a county program? Kind of like when
should we call it the Wobblies?
Mr. Tripp wanted to bring in Syrian refugees.
Well, it's happened before. You know how we got a lot of Varios, and we got a lot of Greeks influence here in Tooele. Mm-hmm. This is during when he was in here, he talked about it. The Wobblies went up against the mines went overseas and bought or purchased for people to come over and live.
But that was back when maybe counties had more power, but today do we have that kind of authority to do something like that? Good question.
So what's your technical question? Can we?
Yes.
Should we?
No, can we?
Can we directly import people from other countries as a county?
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously, no, if our immigration system remains as clustered as it is right now. I mean, I'm woefully disappointed in both Republicans and Democrats alike. I am sick and tired, having grown up in San Diego. So just some context for folks that might not know. I grew up in my family homestead in Fort Union, which is the Midvale-Murray area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I still remember the single bedroom Adobe built house that was built by my great grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Single mom and I live in this home, the original homestead, on what was left of the family acreage, which at that time was about 7 or 8 acres. And the state came along and purchased it for $215 to be constructed. And my single mom, because back then California had a fantastic economy and a very dreamy lifestyle pitch, and certainly still today a better pay parity between men and women doing the same work. That's my plug for there's still more work to be done on that here in our state.
I would like you to get into that after this.
We moved to Southern California. I spent most of that growing up in San Diego County in different parts. Prior to living here in Tooele, as a matter of fact, I'd never lived in one locale longer than 2 years of my life. So we did move around quite a bit. And I can tell you, as somebody who oftentimes would either go to Tijuana or just generally speaking, living in the San Diego area, I think it's atrocious the way that we regard immigration in America, and certainly a lot of politicians do a lot of talking, but none of them really seem genuinely interested in fixing it. The truth of the matter is, guys, like from a workforce development, as long as we're slowing down our per household size and our own internal, breeding and family size, if we want our culture to perpetuate, and if we think our culture is something great to preserve or expand around the globe in the way that we try to approach things, listen, immigration's a pretty good stopgap, because we're not doing a very good job of increasing our numbers enough to sustain our culture over time. So I know that there are companies that need the workers right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one of those that thinks that immigrants somehow don't contribute positively to our culture, our nation, or our workforce. Again, I'm going to argue, just like your democracy and the family scenario of, what do you do with those 5 kids? It's going to be the how. And I do have some opinions on the how, but like counties can't circumvent the federal government. And here we're not on a border, right? So we're not a border state. So even if we wanted to be some refuge city, it's not like we could just turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to people crossing our border from an international standpoint. So you already presumably knew that. So counties, no, we can't individually do it. However, I can say that in Cache County, much like Tooele County in my previous role here, there's a generally welcoming kind of attitude towards immigrants. It was really interesting to me when I took this job to find out that Cache County has quite a rich history of welcoming immigrants. And what I've heard, anecdotally as it may be, is that it kind of started with USU, the land-grant university. You know, this land-grant university, which when Lincoln set those up as we moved westward, it was about, because we were an agrarian culture at the time, and our country's economic base was largely agrarian. It was about how to well manage the land and how to get the greatest amount of yields per acre. And so, much like every other state's land-grant university, ours was set up to do the same thing. And again, I'm told that we had a lot of Persians that came across to study at USU because our geography, our climate, and other factors are very similar to Iran and Iraq. And so they came as students, and they would go back home, and they would take that knowledge that they had learned here and have that there. Well, the Shah gets deposed, and we have the mullahs and some of those folks expatriated from those countries. And because they had, adult children that had an experience at USU, thus many of them settled in that area. I can tell you, I think it's wonderful having grown up in San Diego with much more cultural diversity than we have throughout most of our state. I think it's wonderful just how many different cultures have a representation within Cache County. Now, they're still significantly minority in their percentage of population, but we have a pretty welcoming attitude towards it. I mean, we've had some Afghan families, and we've encouraged more to be settled there because we've already had Afghani, again, a minority population, not significant relative to the overall percentage, but still, and how wonderful is that? I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm just going to make a position statement here. I think that that's great. And as long as we're going to be contributing members like our ancestors probably were, because as I'm looking across the three of us, not to get too far out in front of this here, but I don't see a whole lot of Native American features. Our ancestors were immigrants too. And I know that...
actually, I was a Mohawk,
fantastic.
French, and Iroquois on my mother's side.
Fantastic.
He's from a foreign country, so but he's an immigrant as he sits right now.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, so Shawn...
How so?
Well, you're from California. No, I'm from New York.
I was born here.
Yeah.
Oh, you were born here.
So he was an immigrant, and now he come back.
Through first grade,
he's from New York, so he's an immigrant from a foreign country, from a socialist foreign country.
Well, I've been known on occasion with the right kind of audience to say I grew up in the Socialist Republic of Southern California, so I get it.
And that's the issue. California is a state that has it made a big boom, and it's spending it as fast as it can with its policies.
Let me give you some perspective, and what I'm about to share with you also colored my perspective towards growth while I was a county commissioner here. So the last place that I lived in California, I was on the periphery, the very inland side, about 12 miles away from the coast in Oceanside. So I was in Oceanside proper with our residential address, but I went to Vista High School. And this part of San Diego County is in the northern part. So, fairly intuitively, it was called North County. It wasn't a separate county. It was just a very rural agrarian community being suburbanized. Excuse me. At about the time me and my family had moved there. And what I noticed, so in Vista, and I got a bus ride to the school in the morning, but I had athletics after classes, so I had to walk the 6 miles home. And we had hand routered wood signs long before I had moved in with my mom and a stepfather and, our family at the time. But there were these hand routered wood signs, and they said, Vista, earthworm capital of the world. And our housing development was way out at the periphery at the extension of the city limits. As a matter of fact, just beyond the borders of our residential suburban sprawl was the city limits. And in between that were some open fields. And the ones immediately adjacent to us got rotated from strawberries and tomatoes every single year. I mean, this was very much an agrarian culture, and had been, the breadbasket, the extension, if you will, of so much agriculture that still to this day happens mostly in Central California. But you don't self-profess to be the earthworm capital of the world if you're not agricultural and somehow really proud of it, right? So this suburban sprawl, like all too often I would argue around the globe, this is just what humans do. We take up some of the most fertile farm ground and we put houses as the final crop.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the middle school that I was in just before this was in Oceanside, and we were 100% portables. The only permanent construction building was a small portion of what seemed like just the beginnings of an administrative building on what the campus would be. And all the classrooms being portables, it was because they couldn't bond quickly enough given the growth and the explosion. So you say that they spent a lot of money, they may have, but generally speaking, and I'm not going to get into an education funding kind of argument here unless you want to go there afterwards, but you would think that most would spend money on schools to build permanent buildings if they could, right? And because they couldn't bond quickly enough, we were in portables. Now, I went back about 15 years later for my 10-year high school reunion. Okay. So again, this was middle school. So I'd gone through high school. And so thus it was about 15 years later. And there were only 2 permanent buildings 15 years later. An auditorium, which we never had when I was a student there, and officially like a lunchroom and admin building, because the lunchroom back in my day was a double wide.
So they just stuck with the portable buildings?
And tamped asphalt, like just tamped down
permanently for
15 years.
For 15 years,
right?
Just rolled with it.
Well, I mean, what are you going to do?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
at some point, just like Tooele County's experienced, and I'm not trying to step in somebody else's.
Did they just give up on bonding for a school there?
No, but at some point you reach capacity, and voters like Tooele did a couple of years back say no to bonding. Okay, well, if you think that your kids are going to learn better from a bunch of bungalows, then that's a personal choice, and
honestly,
makes a choice.
Well, I mean, you probably haven't, because my opinion is I'm not always a fan of schools. I think, well, like that one sitting right there, 3/4 of the time sits idle, empty, using electricity and gas.
Okay, and do you think the bungalows are doing much different?
I don't know.
So is this a cultural question?
Take them down and put them up.
Yeah, there's always a less expensive option. Again,
hey,
it's a great position.
Look, you're a government employee, so government over expenditure doesn't hurt you. But I look at it like,
I would beg to differ. I'm a taxpayer too, right?
I would look like it like I'm getting molested, and what do I get for it? Roads. When you see stories of Domino's fixing the roads in front of their store. Okay,
Did that happen here? I don't know. If
No, that didn't happen here. That was in.
Oh, so it's not relevant to the current discussion.
But no, it's not. But it's universal. It's governments. Governments only really. No offense to a government employee. They do one thing successfully.
Can I change? Can I flip this script for you and challenge you for a moment? Governments are as good as the voters want it to be. Every single time. Because while you might live with the consequences of what you perceive to be a bad election or a bad elected official during an election for a while, if you keep putting forth the same kind of candidates, and if you keep putting forth the same kind of public criticism of people that try their best, you're going to get what you vote for. Every single time. We deserve Biden and we deserve Trump. Now, depending on who you are, you might think that's a great thing. I happen to be somebody actually in the middle, and I don't care for either one of them. As a county commissioner, I can tell you this: Trump did some great things, but I didn't care for his style. And I know there are a lot of critics that feel the exact same way about me, and I'll own it. But you get nonetheless what you vote for.
I like his style. I like that he would get on Twitter at 2 a.m. while he's working Taco Bell out of his system, and he would pop a tweet off, and it was always classic. And you know, the people trying to handle him were probably pulling their hair out.
And I would argue that's because he was a great entertainer. Having seen him live, he was a great entertainer. I would argue he's not a great leader.
Probably not.
He was great at getting some things done, especially for Western county states.
We didn't get into any new wars. That's pretty important to me.
I will say this, that for Obama having just ridden coattails and having gotten a peace prize that he should have never gotten, Trump should have been acknowledged for the Abraham Accords a heck of a lot more than
Obama got us into 7 new wars.
Well, you can't go into a war without the declaration of Congress. So,
Obama got us into spending money to make foreign people go pop.
Better, much better.
In 7 new places.
I know you're just trying to be,
but no, I'm not.
But you got to,
I'm not
lives, man.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. I'm against that.
You got to admit,
I'm against war.
We are precision guided now as a country when it comes to selecting military targets. Okay, yeah, you got some collateral damage, but it's not like our grandfathers when we firebombed Dresden anymore.
Yeah,
or like Russia and Ukraine right now. That's clearly intentional.
Sure. Well, what about
cannot be a reasonable human being and look at those apartment
complexes? What about us
and not see that
us and 7 children?
I will say this: if I was a Russian soldier right now and I saw Ukrainian civilians attacking me, after that point, I'd probably start taking out civilians.
I mean, and civilians always get lost in war, and apartments do too. I mean, you hear it coming from Israel all the time. Why are you targeting hospitals and dwellings?
I'm going to yank us back. So,
but that's where the enemy is.
Growth and school.
That's where they set up their artillery.
Government obviously is just good at spending money. I hear you, but I still make that argument that we always get what we vote for.
You're right.
Well, someone does, someone doesn't, because you can't have both sides of the aisle receive the blessing of their leader in office, because someone loses, someone gains, and Do some people deserve Biden? Do some people deserve Trump? And should we get what we want?
Well, we do if we, the people, aren't good at convincing our neighbors through an example of how better to vote. See, we always put this on politicians, but I got to be honest, from my previous role, we are a direct like the politicians, are a direct reflection of the culture that voted us in.
On your previous role in county politics, and I would argue probably even state representative and maybe even state senate. But once you touch governor, that's out of the people's hands. Money drives that. That's driven by small oligarchs. And president, forget about it. You ain't driving a grassroots president anywhere.
Really? So you think that Trump only lost because he didn't have enough money?
No, I think I think the 3 of us could find the perfect guy. Right? The perfect guy.
For us.
The perfect guy not even just for us.
But
we could find the perfect guy that the whole nation could get behind.
I disagree with you.
We couldn't get him anywhere near the presidential office. Who was the last third party guy to run and get anywhere?
Listen, even Jesus I'm going to go there and conflict.
No, Ross Perot
was not.
And how much did he spend?
I want to hear about Jesus.
Everybody did not agree that he was perfect.
You're arguing. I'm arguing an imaginary situation. Say we found someone that everyone could get behind.
You'll never get that, bud. Never.
Did I not just say imaginary? I'm arguing so a point that we're not getting him near the presidential.
We shouldn't deal in theoretical.
We're not getting him near a run for president. Not when we've got two parties who have the control they have. Look at Bernie Sanders.
So what you're saying is we're an oligarchical government that kind of puts forth its leaders and suggestive voting systems with maybe like little remote control clickers that
don't work.
Convention.
Magically.
That don't work at convention.
That's not true. They did work.
Sure. Yeah.
No, clearly they were.
Well, we're going to ask Lloyd when he comes on.
Anyways, what I'm saying is,
I don't know if you're planning on me being here, but he's something.
Look how it went down.
Dude, but he's
look how it went down with Bernie Sanders. I mean, the Democrats folded Bernie Sanders, which is why Bernie Sanders supporters, a substantial number of them, voted for Trump just so they didn't vote for who the party wanted. And he's not even a Democrat. And the party folded him.
Evan McMullen's not really a Republican.
Yeah, but no,
he's certainly not a Democrat, but he got the Democratic nomination.
You're arguing something. You're arguing one point, and I agree. I'm willing to explore those. But what I'm talking about is, unless you get the nod of the oligarchs of the nation, your guy ain't getting near
it. I don't know that I agree with that as absolutist.
I would wonder when the last time in our nation,
Donald Trump,
that someone else
he did not have the nod of the oligarchical class.
You're right, he didn't. And remember,
but he was powerful enough to be his own oligarch.
But also, he went to convention. He says, "You throw me out and see what happens." And that's how he got in. He scared the Republicans into backing him.
And he united a lot of Americans.
Sure, and I'm not
fever.
I'm not a Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter nor fan. I just like his Twitter.
Oh, yeah, I think
he's a Trump supporter and fan.
Best Democrat I've ever voted for.
But I'm just saying, who are you? What's the steps you would take to get someone, a grassroots guy? Let's say you could probably run a grassroots someone who's already a governor, a one of 50 exceptional people already. But how would you run someone from the ground up? I mean, Carter might have been the last.
How did Becky Edwards get into the Republican convention with support? I mean, there has to. I agree. There has to be some sort of a backing of the wealthier class that has power and authority. You're absolutely right about that. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. Normal people, they step up to the plate, and what happens to them?
If donors are the source of the money argument that you're making, how do you get donors? Let me ask two guys who've never probably gone to get donors for elected office. How do you get them?
You got to offer favors.
That's totally not correct.
Knee pads and
there might be some who do that, and I know I had critics that thought I did, but that's not. As a matter of fact, let me tell you an interesting story.
I'm sure there's both appreciate this. You asked a question. Allow me to.
I will, but just a moment. Since you've allowed me this opportunity to segue, there was a donor I had the first time around when I ran. And he was one of many. And I gladly appreciated the opportunity to use his money to buy some signs. Okay. But when it came around for re-election, I'll never forget. I asked him, "Hey, you donated to me before. What do you think?" And he goes, and this is a developer. Okay. This is somebody that is a well-known name that's cursed by certain demographics here in the county. And he said, "No, that didn't work out too well for me last time." Now, what I took from that was, this guy thought I could be bought off. What the hell? Like that was actually pretty offended, but just within seconds, I thought, I'm actually kind of proud of that. Now, ironically, the critics that would have, known that he had donated before or thought that I'd made, and I can tell you specifically, there are folks that thought that I made decisions as a county commissioner that favored him too much. This guy clearly had a different view. And that just proves like there was no knee pads and I was not selling my soul. I made decisions based upon the data in front of me like anybody does. Even some of the people that I don't much respect, I would argue makes decisions predicated upon the data that's in front of them and available to them at that time. Now, they may have a different set of experiences in life that create a bias that I may disagree with their approach to the data. And I have certainly seen on individual votes, people ignore the data for their emotional beliefs. I have absolutely seen that. But I got to tell you, like, it's not selling your soul, guys, to go out to a donor and say,
No, Shawn, don't
hey,
get me wrong. If George Soros offered me money, I would say yes. In fact, I think anyone who says no to someone who's offering them money for their campaign is a retard. Because let's face it, if the Russians are coming into Ukraine and the Ukrainians only got 6 bullets in their pocket and the Russians are pushing ammunition on their logistics line first, and I take that ammunition and use it against the Russians, doesn't make me a bad guy. If George Soros gives me money, he gives me money. I will still use it for what I want to use it. He might not give it to me a second time. Like that guy
he may
didn't
not give it to you
a
at all the
second time.
first time if he doesn't believe in your message. Now, it may also be, to your cynicism, it may also be that he doesn't give you money because he doesn't think you're pliable. Duly noted. That guy in the example I gave that was real apparently thought I was pliable by the way he responded when I asked him the second time around. Shame on him. And, that makes me pretty proud. But still, there are most critics that would not think that, and they probably don't believe it, but regardless. So come back over to you, because I'd asked you if you'd allow me that opportunity to say it, and I did.
I was just going to say,
what point were you going to bring up?
well, no, I was answering the initial question you asked. How do you get donors? I was going to say, well, you can go person to person.
Yeah, that's what
you can get donors who are maybe a little wealthier to put together a dinner and invite their friends. There's multiple ways to get it. I'm sure there's instances where donors seek out someone to challenge a position that's already held.
They do that as well. Yeah. Particularly at the state level, I've seen that be very effective, where folks are like, you know what, I'm tired of this particular politician and I'm going to donate to a campaign. Now, mind you, I respect those that also never get donors or they privately finance their own campaign. Sure. That's fantastic. If we were to only ask for that, though, because I hear this, particularly on national elections, that we should get the money out of politics. Really? Well, then you better not respond subconsciously as a human to signs or the advertising that's very expensive to get my talking points out and my vision for what X elected office I want to run for. Like, if you weren't susceptible to that messaging, folks, then I wouldn't need the money.
Or really catchy chocolate bars with logos on them.
Whatever the case may be.
Just saying.
Whatever the case may be. I'm sure you're...
If anyone needs any chocolate bars.
I do think that...
is this what... Okay. I sometimes forget where you and I have history. I'll never forget 2013 when you had mentioned you had a chocolate company, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the craziest moments, what you suggested we do. And it was obviously said for some attention and you got it. But
what was it?
It was something very culturally insensitive.
Like a chocolate Quran? It happened, man.
With what?
With what?
It was hollowed out and you wanted to fill it with liquor and I wasn't going to take the bait, man.
Oh, was that you?
I was.
No, that actually was going to be little tiny chocolates because you can't hollow out an entire giant 1 pound chocolate bar.
It was an open public meeting in a county commission meeting with Bruce and Jerry and I.
Now, why
you suggested that in some sort of context about how we needed to make more revenue instead of cutting services. You made that proposition, and I remember it was as simplistic as, and I hope you recall this, because I'll never forget, because I thought, well, clearly this guy's saying this to get a rise out of people because he certainly doesn't think that a county, if we can't bring in immigrants across an international border, we couldn't do what you then said next, and that is...
Allow me to make liquor-filled chocolates?
No, it was
I don't want to reach for the moon here.
It was more about there are certain activities permitted in certain counties in Nevada. You said we should legalize here in Tooele County, Utah, to help bring in additional revenue and stop the bleeding.
Oh, the casinos.
No, if only it was that.
Prostitution?
Prostitution?
That was one of two.
You went for it. I like it.
Marijuana? Did I say marijuana?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, look, I'm all for open markets. I really am. And I'm not gonna say
chocolates with a logo. But like I went to individual donors and I also had, like, I remember my first time running for county commission. I had a fundraiser in the park And, I'd reserved the park, paid the fee, invited a bunch of folks to come to the park, and folks knowingly knew they were paying more than the value of a hot dog or hamburger and a bag of chips and a drink. And that remainder is what also helped fund my campaign. So it was grassroots and it was some larger donors, because guess what? I'm not independently wealthy. Right.
Not a famous actor either. So
you probably wouldn't be here if you were.
Would you? I don't know if I would, but I tell you this, like I daydream like anybody else, right? Like I think, what if I had money? And I can tell you, having contributed that now infamous raise that two other gentlemen that I worked with, still good guys. We just vehemently disagreed on giving ourselves a raise. They'd only been in office a few months, and they gave us a raise to match the same pay paid to other elected officials at the county level that worked full-time jobs. And here we were working a full-time job. Like as I told them, I understood the logic, but I'd been in office 2 years, and they were 2 very rough years. First tax increase in our county's history for quite some time, like for 30 years-ish. Okay. We had cut services. We'd laid people off. Sure. They just got popularly elected, which is what one of them had said at the time, was to, I know what I'm doing. These folks that I talk to think that we deserve it. And we had really, really robust private, conversations about this from time to time. And certainly it bled into the public meetings and some candor as well. And I pledged, and I did this up until the very end, not just the next election cycle. I gave 100% of that raise to local nonprofit causes.
And you know what? I totally respect that, Shawn, because I remember that. I remember how everyone was giving themselves the raises there, and you voted against it. You were like the only one
said,
that
well,
did.
you still took it. And I said, well,
what choice did you have?
If a law passes 2-1, the law is still in effect. It's not 2/3 of the law that's in effect. That's how that works. But I pledged it, and I probably could have easily said, hey, in the next election cycle, if I get reelected, I'm just going to keep taking home 100%. I remember it was just a couple of weeks after that passed, and one of those two gentlemen, he was very snarky to a snarky comment I had. I'm sure I'd said something inflammatory, because I was hot, and I was hot for a long time. And I said to this particular gentleman something, and he fired back, well, you still took it. And I said, you're darn right I did. What choice did I have? Well, the reality of it is, what you don't know is you bumped me into a higher tax bracket. My household income now climbed. I pay taxes on that full receipt of that salary. And now I pay more because you bumped me into another tax bracket, and I give it away. So
you lost.
I give away. That's exactly what I was painting the picture. Is I said, you actually went backwards for me. Now, this is great that you're a retiree with a state pension from your previous full-time employment. Now a raise for this as well, but you actually took me backwards. And like, I got to be honest, like in the universe of things at the moment, I was having a pity party, because I'm like, I'm doing the right thing and I'm getting penalized here. This is a bunch of crap. And at the same time, I didn't want to be self-promoting, telling everybody where I was giving this money. Like I can tell you, Children's Justice Center was the single largest recipient of where I would give that money annually, but there were other places I put it as well. And, I look back and I know that I did the right thing. And there were other things that I go back and I do differently. So there are things that you could argue I didn't do the right thing. And, like such as decision-making.
Isn't that everywhere in life?
Exactly. I was going to say parents, business ownership, whatever.
But at your job weekly, you walk home on the Friday night and think, you know what, if this situation comes up again, I'm going to, whatever. It could be a mechanical fix you made or a communication fix with someone else. Every week there's something you're going.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Next time that situation.
So we come back to
up.
donors, right? And money.
Well, hold on. Before you go there, Shawn, I want to ask you about that moment, because that's when I started going to these county meetings.
No, you were there in 2013. That was 2 years earlier, bud.
Okay, so around that time, right? Plus or minus 2 years. I actually remember this moment when we were talking about these pay raises, and I started getting up and talking a little bit more frequently on these government meetings. And I said, well, why can't your salaries be adjusted for the medium income of the actual county to represent what people are taking home as paychecks, right? And then there was a lady that said something to the effect of, your opinion smells of spilt milk. Do you remember that?
I don't.
I was hoping you'd be able to identify who that lady was, because I really wish
Sorry,
I paid more attention to
She
who that
dug
was.
back. She took a bonnet off and dropped the cart that the pioneers.
I don't understand why someone would be offended by that. But of course, here's the guy who suggested prostitution as a way of raising revenue for Tooele
Maybe
County.
she just sat and thought about a comeback to the prostitution thing. It's a couple months later, and that's what it was truly
couple
about.
years later, but okay.
A couple years later, and that's what I mean. She was fuming forever. She's reading Edgar Allan Poe's
that
books.
free market crap can really leave an impact on people.
You two are crazy. You're crazy.
Well, let's look at where we are now. I mean, we have a constitution that's falling into disrepair. We have individual rights are being bled in this nation. And I would argue that, honoring kind of free market and property rights to any level you can, which closes off black markets, is possibly something that should be tried somewhere.
Okay, I'll take this bait, and I'm going to ask you a very controversial question, given the housing shortage, given the growth and the rate and the pressure most folks feel, this tension around growth. Mm-hmm. Should people be able to do whatever they want with their real estate property?
Well, I'm of the free market, which is if as long as you don't hurt the next person down the line, like
and
if you have water.
Therein is the crux. Define hurt.
Well, monetary, physical damage.
What if you block somebody's view? What if their home price literally will appreciate, even though they're in a single family, detached, typical suburban sprawl neighborhood, and there's an apartment complex like planned for 1/10 of a mile down the road from them? Their property values may fall for a moment, and literally in this market, it wouldn't even do that. Mm-hmm. But traditionally speaking, whether it's a gravel pit or an apartment complex, it does not fall. But people say that hurt me.
Sure, but they've got to actually
more traffic. There's people I don't know.
They've got to actually prove it. They've got to prove direct harm.
What if they prove that the traffic is actually quantifiably more on the same road in the morning when they're trying to take their kids to school?
Then who are they suing? Suing all the tenants?
Well, my question is define hurt. That to somebody is probably a very real hurt.
Yeah.
Should we not allow that person to develop
It came
their
out,
property?
we learned it in kindergarten. It's an old Sticks and Stones poem that
so
we
you're saying
recite.
physical impact,
physical or
injuries.
direct monetary impact. Like you did something that I had to go and.
So what if it does hurt them for 4 months during the construction process? What if it does hurt them financially and the home doesn't appreciate as much as a neighborhood a mile down the road without an apartment
views?
complex?
I don't think are physical hurt. I don't think views or if someone paints their house god awful color next door, that you should be able to go after them for that, because that's
actually the state of Utah agrees with you, by the way.
Good. I'm glad the state of Utah agrees with me, because but
where is the line on hurt? Because again,
the Sticks and Stones again, I'm going to go back to it. In kindergarten, they started Sticks and Stones may hurt my bones.
Right.
But
what if it hurts
decibel levels
actual
are
physical hurt. Now, when I'm going to talk about financially, right? They do something that damages your fence.
What if it's okay? Well, that one seems a little bit more
That's
obvious.
That's an actual physical harm. Or they play loud music and you end up with hearing aids, a physical harm that they have to account for. And that's when you go into court and say, look, they played loud music. Here's the recording of them playing loud music. It happened all the time. And here's my doctors and my, my bill for the hearing aids. And then they pay for that.
What if it's the threat that it could hurt you, but it hasn't happened yet? Like you just gave great examples of something conclusively has happened, but what about the possibility that hurt could happen? Should we limit somebody's use of personal property or real property like real estate?
The threat that it could, like maybe you can't sell Coca-Cola because diabetes is a son of a bee.
Or can't put a windmill on the Stockton sandbar as a way to simultaneously preserve it from other kind of development, aka extraction. But the shadow flutter, which was a real thing several years ago when I was in office, that folks proposed that a certain proposal of density of windmills not be allowed on the Stockton sandbar because of that. Like it could hurt them. Or in IRTA, where housing and density has been such a controversial topic, I don't pay the property taxes on 4-generation farmers, land.
Mhm.
They do some dry farming. They have alfalfa, or even if it's just been fallow for the last 10 years, with aged folks. But if there's housing there, it could hurt me in some sort of quantifiable way. Like where is that line on the potential and the interpretation?
Well, and that another one, the farms, is a good one, which it happens to every rural community. It's the life cycle. They have these spread out rural farmlands. Eventually they pop in some medium density, some higher density. And the people who get run off is always the farmers. Every time.
You don't feel like the farmers sell off? You feel like they're run off?
They sell off, Jared. Come on.
Oh, they sell off, but they sell off.
The money's good.
They sell off because they're tired of answering for people going, why are you out at 5 a.m. on that noisy tractor? Why does it smell like
that doesn't
pig shit?
happen all that often. Now,
I guess we
I
could
can tell
ask
you
farmers.
Those nuisances are there. Well, but
But
who is it for somebody
I'm
that's
not
been
arguing
there 10 years or 1 or 20 who's come lately to tell a 4th-generation farmer whose biggest net worth asset is that land and has seen the field that used to be proximate to them 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 1 year ago, now be suburban, and say, now is my turn. Like,
No,
you
I
only live there because somebody allowed that once used to be
I
a
arguing
farm. No.
against that?
I don't know if you are. Because
But you're
that's
arguing
somebody's-
harm and you're molding into a different conversation.
That's my point, though. Somebody will interpret that as, I've been hurt by that. That's
who's been hurt? Who's going to argue they've been hurt?
A lot of people that came to county commission meetings.
Is the farmer that's going to
and
sell?
so don't you dare allow that rezone.
Oh, okay.
I might get
So
hurt.
you're talking about Erda. They want to keep.
They're just one example, Jared. There's actually a lot of them.
Yeah, but
sure.
Erda wanted to keep their community in these 5-acre lots,
So who's going to build the roads?
and that's fine. But
Well, you wouldn't need the homes if you don't have the subdivisions. in
So
theory.
guys, we have Lloyd coming on.
okay, yeah.
He's going to be on voice. He's not going to be on video. But I just want to make sure this is the correct Zoom link that you sent.
Yeah,
me,
the one I
Jared.
sent you is the
All
correct
right.
one.
So we're going to have Lloyd. Lloyd is a special case here. He's a guy who wants to run for Senate against Mike Lee. I mean, how dare he challenge him, right? Most inappropriate thing he can do in the Republican Party. But he did. And he made some good points on the convention. And I said, we got to get Lloyd on the show.
Okay.
He had a very interesting perspective.
All right.
Speaking of perspectives, while Jared's pulling that up, I will say this. I thought you were going to ask me when you had invited me about the convention role. Instead, we spent an awful lot of time talking about everything from aliens to Ukraine. And,
Were you had expectations?
well, you helped me manage my expectations by what you said in the green room that you wanted to ask me about. So
Gosh.
I thought you were looking for the inside scoop to the, how do you plan the logistics of 4,000 people plus getting in to vote? Which no worries, right? But at the same time,
No, and I
spent
think
none of the time talking about those things.
well, it's someone ran late, so we're like, all right, we'll run
fair
with the
enough.
news story.
That's fair.
And so we were knee deep in it, and you walked in, and then it came to the point where we do differ on our opinion. I am anti-war,
So we're still not touching the Republican convention topic. That's what I just heard.
and so and Dave is
I'm sure we'll get there with Lloyd. He'll want to talk about
Well,
it.
good for Lloyd. I thought that's what you invited me for.
You're now part of the conversation.
Okay. Instead,
But
I took
yeah.
your bait on things of the past.
See, I don't even really bait. It just naturally happens.
Yeah, it's true. I'm a sucker. I give my opinion too freely.
all right.
I wouldn't call it a sucker, Sean. And maybe it's just an honest streak in your character. And that's not a
I'm taking that
necessarily
as a
bad
compliment.
thing.
No, I'm going to take it as a compliment. Thanks. Your fellow co-host is trying
Just
to
put his name in there.
All right.
But yeah, but anyway, so how was it last minute setting up the I heard you had what, like a week to
No, I was asked months ago.
oh, you had months? Oh, then it's a boring
I had
conversation.
a couple of
No, I'm
months
just
to do it.
kidding.
Although that said, and Chairman Jorgensen knows,
Mhm.
I've told him that if he asks me to do this again in the future, give me a little bit more notice to assemble a team, get vendors together and stuff like that. This was actually my third time being the convention committee chair. And so when he asked,
How many people's in your committee? How does that How does that work? Or
so there's well over 100 volunteers, but there's
Uh-huh.
a core committee of about 20 people of different assignments. And I include in that the leadership team of 4 that are elected to represent the party in the state.
What's his
chairman,
last?
Chairman, vice chair, and secretary. We've got a parliamentarian, we have a rules chair, we have credentials chair, we have registration chair, we have someone to find volunteers, we have logistics chair, which actually this year was one of our very own, Tracy Shaw.
Oh, yeah.
Tooele County Clerk.
She's outstanding to put involved in anything.
She is awesome. And her husband, Brian, really deserve a lot of credit. So the party hasn't had quite the same funding level this year that it's had in the past. And so we didn't have full-time staff to help us with a lot of the logistics and groundwork in the day-to-day function. So all of the committee members have full-time jobs, and normally enough that would be impressive that folks volunteer outside of that to help put this on. But we had a lot more volunteer hours per person this year because of not having the full-time staff.
I thought you guys did an awesome job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that on behalf of the whole team, because it was a team effort. And I'll tell you what, the last time I was chair was 20, when we had 6 weeks to pivot from a normal, like you just experienced, convention in person, and we had 6 weeks where the state was shut down and we had to pivot. So we had to find a reliable online voting mechanism that was auditable and still had the integrity of casting a vote remotely, and still being able to have the wherewithal for having candidates speak to us. I mean, this almost seems like 2 years later, like not a big deal, but it was a huge deal at the onset of the pandemic.
Yeah.
How do you change things remotely and still be spur of the moment and live without big latency or lag in technology, and have that many users on a platform where there's some semblance of engagement?
What do you think about the voting that we have come out of since the pandemic? Because it's here. The vote by mail is here. It's
as a county commissioner, it's
universal.
I was quite proud to work with Myron and Wade to increase vote by mail, particularly in Stansbury Park area. I mean, listen, it's not to say that it's not fraught with some complications. It is. When you increase votership and make it easier, one must ask themselves, how easy do you want it to be for folks to weigh in without having done some homework? Right. That's the whole argument of the convention, the caucus convention system versus signature gathering route. But there's merits to both sides, and I actually think having both in place is a great check and balance. I can give you some notable convention results that completely flipped in the supermajority sense by the time it went to a general, like a primary election. That general everyday Republicans, when they got to weigh in, they flipped from what the delegates said at a convention. And I think that's good because it keeps the system honest. There are folks that are diehard caucus convention system, and I get where that's coming from. I've been a delegate for many, many years, and I believe in that system. And you're right. You typically get folks who are the most passionate, who are the most willing to contribute the hours to research candidates and topics, and, weigh in and do that sort of democratically elected at the precinct caucus level.
It is
republicanism. And
what's that, Dave?
No, it is Loy. Okay, it's Loy.
Okay, sorry.
So Loy without the D for Senate.
Yeah.
And at the same time, when you have rank and file Republicans who are themselves the base of the party, willing to say, hey, I'm willing to put my signature on a line, and I want this person to be a choice at a primary, you can't argue against that unless you're for your favorite word today seems to be oligarchy. Great. If you want a chosen few to be able to say, this is who we shall have an option to vote for. And the rank and file are like, no, I actually want this person. I want to see them in June by our timelines. I want to see them in June as well. Then, in theory, if the delegates have made great decisions that the base believes in, the base would never undo that. But Herbert versus JJ, 70-30 split at convention, Herbert would have been out, but 4 signatures. By the time it went to the primary election, Herbert overwhelmingly, that flipped. Same thing with Mike Kennedy, state senator, versus Mitt Romney. It was, again, like Mitt overwhelmingly lost that state convention, but when it went to primary, the base of the party said, no, thank you. I mean, Mike's a nice guy, but we want Mitt. So that kind of involvement, that kind of planning, that kind of system. I don't know if that's what you were kind of asking as far as it goes into convention planning and the shtick of it all, but it is an interesting approach to the day.
Let's face it, mail-in balloting is here. It's here. The Pandora's box open, and we're not going to change it back, even though, some people in the Republican Party argue against it. It's here. And I think it's time for us to move forward and start.
So do you subscribe to the theory? I'm just asking genuinely, to increase accessibility to voting, or is your position that, I think I'm hearing it, that this is already here, so it shall remain. I guess my question is, and do you think that's the appropriate way to go? Should it be easier for folks to be able to check a box without much need to do their homework through voter information pamphlet? I mean, like when you have vote by mail, of course, you still have those. Like you still have the ability in today's day and age, like we're doing mixed in here with the whole production of the show. People can go online. They can find out about a candidate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
I was happy to have been part of a decision to increase the accessibility of folks being able to vote, but it did make it more expensive. Physically mailing out a ballot, also buying signature verification machines for the clerk's office to be able to say, oh, this wasn't somebody intercepted your ballot, Dave, and voted for who they wanted and then forged a signature or made it random and sent it on back. Like that signature verification machine was a pretty big price tag, in addition to the printing costs of the ballots, in addition to the postage of the ballots. Like it did make it more expensive, but you would argue that more expensive was good for the right reason, to preserve democracy, right?
Oh yeah, I'm all about.
I don't know if I want to make voting as easy as fast food.
Okay, you want to hear
this down a different route, because I was going to argue that the weapons purchases and training of Ukrainian soldiers was good for democracy.
You want to hear some crazy notions?
This is your show, and so far tonight,
I sit next to Thomas Sowell. I sit next to Thomas Sowell with thinking I would be okay if you had to pass a literacy test to vote.
Or what about just pay $5?
Poll tax.
Ooh,
no, just pay $5. It's not a
going
tax.
to be tantamount to a poll tax.
By definition, that's
the Republican
a poll
Party
tax.
in the state of Utah asked delegates to do that a few years ago to help with its solvency.
But
because during the SB 54 fight, we were heavily in debt.
If you're going to mail something in, I think you should have to pay $5. That way, when the Democrats at least want to bring truckloads of ballots, at least there's $5 in every one.
Well, I do like that we have
signature
guarantees, a machine to check signatures. That if you're going to do it, I think it's here, and I think we're going to see in the next 10 years, we're going to see internet voting, like
blockchain technologies.
Hopefully,
well, we did it during the Republican convention 2 years ago.
Hopefully, blockchain technology, but
no. Voting by
Votes was an app, VOATZ, and it worked fine.
Well, there's a company.
Were some challenges for
there's
some
a
folks,
company that's working on blockchain voting.
Sure, yeah,
and
there's a couple.